focus. So the first thing that I'd say is the answer likely isn't an answer that's out there somewhere looking for what it is that I should be doing, trying to get inspiration from what it is that I should be doing. Generally, if you look in, then you will find what it is that you should be doing, what you enjoy, what your core passion is. And often it's not the thing that you tell everyone that it is. It's the thing that when you start talking about, you light up, you get excited, you can't help but become animated, you love it. Even if you don't know how that's going to make you money, you know that you love this thing. That generally, that thing that lights you up, that brings you to life, is your thing.
Hello and welcome to the Need to Succeed podcast. And the aim of this podcast really is to have phenomenal conversations with great entrepreneurs and just really understand what is the need to succeed. Because oftentimes what happens is, one person or two sets of people go through the exact same situation. One person goes on and says, because of this situation, I'm not really going to be able to achieve the things that I want to achieve. And the other person goes, because of this situation, I am absolutely going to have success. What is the difference between those two mindsets? And that's exactly what we look to uncover on the Need to Succeed podcast. And today I have got an absolutely phenomenal guest, right? Now, this is someone who's got over 15 years of experience in the property field, right? Multiple businesses. He's been involved in over 15,000 real estate transactions. His company itself has turned over 10 million pounds. And get this, has transacted over 4 billion pounds worth of real estate. And yes, that is with a B. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the main man himself, Mr. Ben Jacob Smith.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to be here, Dylan. Thank you.
Oh, man, honestly, it's so good to have you here. And I know some of the people watching are probably thinking, you always say that, all right? No, but genuinely, I've really been anticipating this.
Same.
I've been looking forward to this for a very, very long time, because when I first thought about this podcast, you were the very first person I spoke to. I said, I've got to get Ben on.
I remember, thank you.
Right.
I remember it very clearly. I remember it well, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just honored, I'm thrilled, and I know this is going to be an absolutely phenomenal conversation. So I am looking forward to it.
Me too, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being there. Okay, brilliant. So Ben, look, we have got a tradition on the podcast, all right?
Tell me. Yep.
And the very, very first question is, what does success actually mean to you?
So, big question.
It is a big question. Yes.
It's a hard hitter to come straight out with. What does success look like to me? I feel like if I think about the reasons that I do what I do and why I do what I do, success to me looks like I'm in control of my life. Success to me looks like if I feel like I want to be able to do something, I can do something about it. Success to me is to not be dictated to about what it is that I have to do. It can be about making a decision to go somewhere and then actively move towards that. So success for me really comes down to two things, I suppose. One is freedom, in terms of my time and in terms of doing only what it is that I love to do. And the second is having control over my life, where I want to get to, and know that the steps in between, I've got control to get there. That for me, if I feel freedom and control, I feel like I'm being successful.
Brilliant. Such a great answer. And I completely agree, by the way. But generally, most people, when they speak about that, it's really about freedom. But you've mentioned about 2-3 times in there, control, right?
Yeah.
Well, and you also pre-framed it by saying, when I think about my life and I think about why I do what I do, it's really about having that control. Where does that come from?
So control for me, it's an interesting question. It's one that actually has only really come to light for me in the last year or so, in understanding where that need for control comes from. And where it came from initially was, I understood that when I had this big vision and I realized I can't quite get there in the next day, I felt like I was out of control of it. It's like, I want to get there, but I can't. And I lost control of it. And then when you've got individuals in business that maybe they're letting you down, or suppliers or partners or whatever it is that's going on, you feel like you're out of control of your business. And that was causing me to procrastinate heavily. Yeah, I don't want to do this thing anymore because I don't feel like I'm in control of it. And that isn't good for me in my own psyche, my own definition of success. If I'm not moving towards it, it spells trouble for me, you know, in terms of my mindset. So I was looking into this and thinking, why is it that I need that element of control? And I can trace it back. I trace it back and I look through all the aspects of my life, you know, personal and professional, and look at where I've needed to be in control, or at least feel like I'm in control, to be able to succeed and perform. And that for me would have to come back to, you know, very early ages as a kid. I mean, really early ages, really, way less than my teens, where, you know, I'm part of a big family. I've got lots of siblings, lots of brothers and sisters, and we lived in a very small bungalow. You know, there were 2 bedrooms, and there were 8 of us living in this little tiny place. And so there was a lot of sleeping on floors, and there was a lot of stealing each other's food, and there was a lot of, hey, this is mine, no, that's mine, this is mine, and kind of doing this hoarding mentality, you know, of like, that's mine. No, we've got this and we've got this. So there was an element of control quite early. I want to control what I eat by taking this portion of what's mine. And I want to control this space on the floor. This is mine. So it came quite early with feeling like, to be comfortable, I had to feel like I was in control, you know, from quite an early age. So that kind of persisted growing up, and as I was into my teens, you know, the same thing happened, but on a bigger scale. So now it was about controlling my own money and my own destiny. So it was okay, I'm not just going to do 1 paper round, I'm going to do 2, and then I'm going to get a job after school, and then this. So I felt like I was in control of that portion of my life, and that was important for me. And it was only in my sort of mid-teens, so kind of when I was 15 or so, that, I don't know, we'll touch on this, but I found myself, you know, homeless, and we will speak about that and unpack it, I'm sure. But I was homeless, and there was this one occasion specifically that I remember where, you know, in Southend-on-Sea, which can be quite a rough part of town, and I was under this boat, you know, it's the shore on Southend, and I was on the beach under this boat, and just laying there, you know, and I slept under there for quite a few times, and that was kind of became my home for some time. And it was there that the ultimate fear of being out of control hit me, because I'm not in control here. I find myself in this situation, but I'm not in control. And so this ultra high alertness, this ultra high need to get out of it kicked in, you know, and that's where I realized that to do that, I had to pursue what was in my small limit of control at that time and expand my control out from there. And actually, if I look at everything in my business and the way that I structure it, and in my personal life as well, the element of control, of me being in control, it is always there. It's really fundamental of what it is that I do.
Wow, powerful. I mean, yes, definitely, we're going to sort of touch on that, because there's a lot of similarities in our stories in that regards. But I just want to go back a little. You said you guys, there was a family of 8.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. That's big.
Yeah.
And I come from a Nigerian background. Even for us, that's big.
It's a big family.
Okay.
There are a lot of us. There are a lot of mouths to feed, and there was a lot of dynamic going on there with a big family.
Where did you fall in that 8? Where were you, in the middle, or the top, or the bottom?
Oldest son, and I've got 2 sisters that are older than me. So I'm somewhere in the middle.
So in the middle there. Okay. So there was some sort of responsibilities. You weren't quite the youngest, so at that sort of middle age.
I was in the middle age, so in terms of oldest brother, so you kind of had your younger brothers that were there, so there was that type of responsibility of kind of first guy that's born into the family, and then that because I had my 2 sisters that had come before me, so it's a different dynamic now. There's a boy in the mix rather than just the girls, so there was a whole change of mix. So yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle.
And what was that like growing up in that environment? Because 8 people. Or 8 kids? Is that 8 kids or 8 people?
8 people.
8 people.
So 6 kids, 2 from my parents.
In a 2-bedroom.
Yeah.
Bungalow.
Yeah.
Like how was that?
It was hectic. It was manic. It was tight. It was close quarters. There was lots of this is mine, no, this is mine, and that's yours, that's yours. There was lots of sharing. There was lots of hand-me-downs. There were lots of coats and clothing that I remember my sister wearing that I was like, okay, it's relatively unisex, maybe I'll wear that as well. And you know, back in those days it was easier, you know, it was all tracksuits and they're all like reds or blues or actually neon greens and oranges, and I remember those sorts of which were relatively unisex, right? So it was quite easy to get some hand-me-downs. So there was a lot of that going on, but there was a lot of fighting and jostling for position, understandably, in that situation as well, where you are in close quarters. There's nowhere really to escape to, if you like, so you are confronted with this dynamic every day. It wasn't an easy dynamic, but I muddled my way through okay.
Brilliant. Do you remember feeling in a certain type of way or at all? And that's always, so for example, if you had friends who, you know, maybe there were just two of them and maybe they also lived in a 2-bedroom, they didn't have to maybe share with their sisters or brothers or wherever it might be. Do you remember just sort of thinking we have less at that point, or not really?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, without doubt. You know, I'd go around my friends' properties and they'd have nice 3-bed, 4-bed, whatever. They had this big bedroom. Then there was this separate toy room and this separate game room. And then they had this thing downstairs. But actually the thing that got me the most was you could go into the kitchen and there was food everywhere, you know, and a lot of it as well. In my household growing up, it was, if there's food, you grab it and you grab it fast because it's going to be gone. You know, the parents come back with food, you know, in the front door and it's like, boom, it's gone. You know, you have to grab what you can. And I found it a really interesting dynamic that you didn't have to rush for food. You didn't have to grab at it. You didn't have to worry that it wasn't going to be there anymore. And actually, more so than, wow, this very spacious and very comfortable here, it was small things like that made me...
Little things, right?
Little things that you'd notice and feel like, you've just put your wallet down there. That's got money in it. And you've just left that there. In my household, if there was money around the place, it was like, oh, you know, like I might go and spend that on some sweets or whatever you're going to go and do.
Yeah.
So just to have things laying around freely, not to have to be in control of them, just to let them be. Small things like that actually made a big difference. I never grew up with a complex. I never grew up with a complex of, oh God, we haven't got a lot.
I was going to ask you that, like, how did that make you feel in the, so, you know, the first time you had that realization of like, oh, like I can just pick up something from the kitchen. There's a wallet just left there. Why can't we have that at our house? Like, do you remember like how that made you feel?
Made me feel like I want that.
Okay.
Made me feel like I want that. Didn't make me feel like, oh, that's a shame. Or when I go back this, it made me feel like that's what I want. And it almost I just parked it in myself. You know, I want that. And I'll have that someday. I'll have that. So I just used to make a lot of observations more than anything of, okay, that's what I want. That's what I want. And I didn't really look at, oh God, I don't know how I'm going to do that. It was just, I want that.
That's so incredible, isn't it? Because that's the thing that they say about success. Like you just need to set the course. You don't need to understand how it's going to happen or what you're going to do to
100%.
make it happen, but you just need to know this is going to happen, and then naturally you're going to take actions towards it, right? So
that's the thing. I mean, listen, nobody at 12 years of age is sitting there saying, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this 15-step blueprint together and this plan, it's going to take me from here to here and here. Then I'm going to be like, no, it wasn't that. You know, and we can like sensationalize it and make it look like that. But no, at that age, you're just looking around you, just thinking, I'd like that. Oh, I want that. I don't want that, but I do want that. And it's almost like you're sifting and you're sorting through these things, the things I do and don't want. How it's going to happen, whatever, that'll become apparent when it's time for it to become apparent.
absolutely.
But at that age, it was almost just enjoying the freedom, even if I was experiencing it from somebody else's perspective and not quite my own yet.
But it's incredible because, you know, there's also someone else who would go through that same scenario and really feel sorry for themselves. And I'm just really trying to unpack that, you know, the fact that you're able to look at that situation and be like, oh, I'll get that someday. I like that and I want that. That's fine. And then just kind of move on. Like that in itself is the mindset of what gets people to where, you know, where they probably actually want to be. So that's incredible. But kind of moving on. So you're probably around about 12 at this age, you were saying, no?
About that. Yep, I was
12.
early years of secondary school. Yep.
Okay, brilliant. And then you said you got to the age of 15. You mentioned about being homeless at one point at 15.
Yeah.
Like, how does that situation come back? Because 12 years old, 13, 14, 15, most people are still living at home, right?
Yep.
Like, how does that situation kind of come about?
So, you know, 12, 13, 14 years old, you know, you're sort of bumbling on as you do. And, you know, going to school and your brothers and sisters are going to school as well. And, you know, just doing what kids do. just growing up, just a family. Yeah, it was tight. Yeah, it was a bit tricky, but and families go through things, and they do, and that is what happens. But it was at 15 that I found myself homeless. So there was no like lead up to it, and it was a slow burner, and eventually I knew it was going to happen. No, it was quite a fast realization, really. So there was a family breakup, between my parents, and through a chain of events, the property that we're in was repossessed, and the first notification we had was a note on the door that said, you've got 48 hours or something ridiculously small to leave.
Did you see that letter?
I did see that letter. Yeah, I come home from school and saw it on the door. And I think I was probably one of the first to see it because it was still on the door, and I'm pretty sure one of my brothers or sisters or parents would have taken it off and done something with it. So I remember coming home from school, just like normal, walking home from school, 15 years old, and I remember it very clearly because I was at the age when I was just doing my GCSEs. So it would have been a June, July time, finishing GCSEs up, leaving early to go home and study. And I remember going home and studying and seeing this letter on the door, an eviction notice. You got 48 hours to leave. I was just like, what? Like, what is this? Like, what does this even mean? Like, I'm reading it, but I'm not understanding it. What do you mean 48 hours to leave? And I was just like, I was at home by myself, which is unusual with that many people around. And I couldn't wait for one of my parents to get back and say, like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? Where are we? What's happening? Like, in a state of panic, So got in, and it was a long, long wait in the lounge, sat on the sofa, didn't have the TV on, didn't have anything distracting me, just sat there just thinking something's happening, something's changing, something's going to go down.
Wow.
And I left the letter up. I didn't take it off. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't even know what was going on, and sat there and just was absorbed by what I'd read. And then, mum came home and...
You didn't understand the letter, but did you, like, what did it make you feel? Just kind of looking at that letter and thinking, what did it mean by 48 hours? Do you remember, like, how you were you feeling like, okay, this is something really bad, or were you just not understanding it?
No, I knew this was bad. Yeah, this was bad. And I was looking around myself, because, a family doesn't just all of a sudden one day they're happy, the next day break up. There's story. And there's backstory, and there's things that happen, and chains of events that go off. So you knew something was happening, something was coming, but not quite to that extent where you're going to lose your family home. That's a different kind of level of fear for a kid, And bearing in mind, I was the oldest son at that point at 15, and my brothers were in their early teens and less than 10 years old, so very young. So there was a lot of us. There was a lot going on. So I understood that there was something that was about to happen. I was 15. Smart enough, academically wise, I understand, I loved school, I love learning, I love absorbing. So I understood. I wasn't silly to the idea of what something was happening, but I couldn't comprehend it. I couldn't understand why. I didn't know the workings of this. And I didn't actually realize that you could just have your home taken away. I didn't understand that was a thing. So waiting for sort of mum to come back and sort of confronting her with this, and basically it was from those next 2 days on, it was, listen, everything you've got, pack it up. Just start packing your clothes, your everything, your books, your artifacts, your trophies. I did a lot of temping bowling, your trophy, everything that you've got, everything you've collected. And there was a lot of stuff. There's 8 of us in this small place, so it's absolutely crammed. And there were a couple of sheds out in the garden, and there was just stuff everywhere. And it was, we can't possibly cram all of this. Look, where are we going to put it? And there were just piles of things just appearing from everywhere. And it was just this frantic couple of days of doing that. And one thing in particular, it's funny the things that stick with you, and looking back and you think, why did that matter? But I remember I was very close with one of my sisters, and she would love to paint, and she would paint some of the interior doors, like in the property and in the bungalow, and on the interior doors she'd have designs, a scene from some Disney film, so like The Lion King, and there'd be like a Timon and a Pumbaa there, and she painted the whole door. So she was pretty good. It was great. It looked amazing. It looked really good. And actually, I remember we took a picture of it, a copy of it, and put it on a mouse mat, which we had printed onto a mouse mat back then. And I still got it today, 20 years on. I still look at it and I'm like, it reminds me of that. It actually reminds me of this time that I'm speaking about now. And there's this Timon and Pumbaa, and it was on this bedroom door that, I used to sleep in. And I just thought, well, we have to take the door. We have to take the door. That's a big part of how are we going to get the door off? And it was down to thinking more than the clothes, and it was look at the door. I remember us painting that door, and it was something just as poignant as that I just thought, how are we even allowed to do the door? Is the door ours? Who does that door belong to? But it is ours because we painted it, and I was in a real panic about this door. The door stayed, the door stayed in the property because we had to load up a car. You don't have a lot of money. You can't get the removals guys in. What do? You've got 2 days to get your stuff out. You can't put a door in a small car. So that stayed, and so did a lot of other bits and pieces. But for those 2 days, it was just sheer panic. And in the meantime, going to school to do my GCSEs whilst that was going on, because there were still exams going on. And I know that I hadn't wasted my time going through school to jump my GCSEs. So there was a lot happening.
Wow. So you get in the car, like, where do you go?
So I know that behind the scenes, Mum had done a lot of going to the council and saying, listen, we're going to be imminently homeless, and the council were bad in terms of, what to do and where to go. And essentially it was a case of, listen, on the day that you are, come to us and you can come and wait here, and there'll be some sort of emergency accommodation that you're put into.
So on the day, just rock up and then we'll figure it out from there.
Right. Yeah. Just rock up to the offices, which she did, and we'll give you something on the day. So on the day, and I don't really remember the day well, I'll be honest. I think I checked out mentally. I don't remember the day. I don't remember that final leaving, that final seeing the door shut behind you. I don't remember it. And that's a good thing, I think, because I think that would be very cutting. And that would have been a moment that I've probably almost chosen to not remember. Yeah. Because I'm sure I'd have seen it. There would have been a time I did finally leave, but I don't remember it. So Mum went to the offices. I was still at school, doing my exams. So Mum would go there. And I don't know the dynamic, who was there with her. I suppose some of my brothers would have been there with her as well. So she went there and was given this emergency accommodation, which I believe at that point in time was a hostel on York Road in Southend, which is a notoriously nasty road in terms of what goes on down there. Lots of crime, lots of stealing, lots of, these days, murder, prostitution, drugs. It's the road, it's the strip that happens on. And you find yourself from this relatively comfortable, that's funny, isn't it? That put into perspective. Yeah. I was going around my friends' properties thinking they're comfortable, we're not. But actually put in the perspective of, there's a hostel room here, and now what you had was actually comfortable in perspective. Wow. It was relatively comfortable relative to what we now had. So, and I do remember this. I do remember the first time pulling up to this big yellow hostel on this road and thinking, wow, like this is us. This is where we are now. And I remember we opened the front door and the guy greeted us, the guy that owns it, and showed us upstairs. Went around, relatively dark and dingy in there, and it's a hostel, and it was also a bit of a halfway house. So there was a lot of very rough and ready individuals that were in there, and there was a lot going on in there. You could see people scurrying in and out of rooms with DVD players and TVs and electronics and stuff going on.
Where are you going with that?
Yeah, where's it come from? Where are you going with it? And there's a lot of activity and a lot of exchange going on in there. Let's just put it that way. And a nice guy, the owner. He genuinely was there to help and made a huge impression on my life. And still does, in terms when I think back to him. And I've had some interaction with him recently, which has been amazing. But going back to then was going round, and he put us up at the back of the building where it's at its quietest, because he knew we're a family.
sense, yeah.
Yeah, we were there through series of events that had unfolded, as opposed to, listen, you've done this bad thing and now you're here.
Yeah, different circumstance.
Different circumstance. So he walked us round the back, through this other part of the building, round up the corridor, right up the stairs, and we were sort of the last room round there. And I remember opening that door for the first time and just being met by a room that had 1, 2, 3, 4 beds and a bunk bed. So it would have been my mum and us 3 sons. So one of my brothers went with my dad. So there were 3 tiny single beds pushed side by side, then a bunk bed in the corner. There was a bathroom. It's not a bathroom. There was a cloakroom. I mean, it was tiny. There was a shower squeezed into it, but it was tiny. And then a tiny little toilet here, a tiny little sink, and the bathroom was literally, I could put my arms out and show you how big it was. If you make a big square with your arms, that was pretty much the floor plan of this bathroom. No fridge, no cooker, no kitchen, no sink, obviously none of those bits and pieces. You know, one of the first things that went through my head was, where are we going to put the milk? Like, to make tea, to have breakfast. Like, there's no fridge, there's nowhere to cook food. Ended up, you know, the ledge on the outside of the window was where the milk stayed, because it was cooler out there than it was indoors, you know, and that's where the milk lived. That was the fridge. There's no fridge. Yeah, that was the fridge. Yeah, the shelf outside on the window ledge. And just looking around this room, never ever felt so trapped. And lost. Never felt so, now what? One day I come home from school, see this letter, 3 days later in this hostel, still doing my GCSEs.
Very fast, right?
Very fast. Loads of the car still loaded up with loads of stuff. I can't bring it in this room. You know, it's a room. You know, a family member took some of it, some of our items. A lot of it had to stay there and get repossessed, get taken away. You know, we lost a lot of stuff, or it got skipped, or whatever happened to it. I don't really know. And yeah, was in this place. And when the door shut behind and we found ourselves in this tiny little room, that's when it really hit. You know, this is now where it is. Yeah, this is now home. And actually that feeling of being hemmed in was worse for me than the place that we were staying in. That feeling of no escape. Because even in a relatively small 2-bed bungalow, there's always a nook that you can go to that's yours. You could always go out in the garden, you could go and sit in the shed, and that's your space. You know, I grew up spending hours, days, weeks, months just sat in the shed by myself reading or doing something, but that was my space. You know, and the shed was bigger than this room was. So there was space there, but this feeling of not having space drove me insane. Couldn't do it. Like, could not do it. Hence why I then took myself onto the street, because you've got as much space as you want.
So what, you just decided to leave? Like, I can't do this.
I can't do it. I stayed there for some time. I stayed there for maybe a week.
Oh, so that quick?
Yeah.
And how about because at this point you were also doing the GCSEs as well, right?
Yeah.
How was that going?
I just had this ability to be able to switch and to go into, okay, I'm here to do these GCSEs.
Where does that come from?
No, I couldn't tell you. I don't know where that come from. It's some sort of compartmentalizing. It's some sort of holding 2 ideas in your head at once and being able to perform at both. Because it was, my friends didn't know that I was going through this. I didn't tell them. And say, hey, by the way, I'm living in this hostel now. For as far as they're concerned, you know, I'm still coming from where we lived and cycling my way into school. Well, that wasn't the case. You know, so behind your eyes, you had this new construct that was going on, but looking at them, they had no idea. So that was a challenge, because it was, you're looking at me as if I'm the same person that I've always been, and I'm not. And that was a poignant feeling that I remember feeling.
Was that constant whenever you're around them, or?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. And actually, I lost contact with a lot of my school friends, you know, shortly after GCSEs had finished. You know, my life had changed and done such a crazy turn that it was hard to think about anything other than how do I get myself out of this. The luxury of being able to keep friendships and relationships wasn't something at that point in time that I could do. And I do see that as a luxury.
Yeah.
I do see that as something that you can do that when you're comfortable enough to be able to do that. And if you're not, because you've got other extremely serious pressing issues that are going on, the luxury of just giggling around and joking and doing what boys do at 15, I didn't have that anymore. So it's very difficult to have relationships with those that still had that.
Wow. So I mean that's obviously a very, very powerful statement for most 15-year-olds, because it's literally about friendships and building those relationships at that age, right? So what was now taking up that time that you would normally have with your friends to actually nurture those relationships? What were you doing instead?
Walking and walking and walking up and down the seafront in Southend, just walking around endlessly. I cannot imagine the amount of miles that I walked every day, up and down and up and down.
Is it walking or thinking? Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Thinking.
Yeah.
And that's a habit that I now have. If I'm on a phone call that, you know, there's going to be an outcome, I have to walk when I'm doing it. If there's a business idea that I've got brewing, I have to be walking when I'm doing it. Walking, being active and walking is how I think. You know, movement is how I sort of bring ideas together. So there was a lot of that, but I tell you what, there wasn't a lot of wallowing. There wasn't a lot of, oh my God, why me? Why is this going on? What happened? Poor me. Didn't think that.
But once again, I'll just go ask that question again, because that's something that's easy to think, right?
Yeah.
In those positions. And, you know, at some level, you probably say, you know, justifiably so, because you've just been through something that most people would actually never experience in their lifetime at all, right? So what was it that made you able to just focus on the future, focus on the next step, as opposed to just looking at, you know, what your situation was in that moment?
Yeah, good question. It kind of goes back a little bit to when I was a kid. And this is why I don't quite know where it came from. But when I went round to my friends' houses, I'd look at their situations and not think, oh, I'm poor, or we can't have that. It was very much, oh, I want that, or I'd like that, or that looks good. So I guess just a different perspective, just a different way of actually seeing the same thing, but from a different side. You could look at this same thing, and as a standalone thing, it doesn't mean a lot. They have food in the cupboard. But what does that mean? To most people, that's normal. To some people, that's how I can't comprehend there being food in the fridge, in the cupboard. So the thing itself is, there's always a perspective that you can take on it. And for me, it was just always a choice of looking at, okay, I want that. I want that. And that carried through to when I was walking up and down the streets thinking, but I want this and I want this. Not, oh my God, I don't have that. You know, so there was just that same perspective actually carried through. I didn't allow myself to put blame on myself. I didn't allow myself to feel guilty for the fact that this had happened. I didn't want to feel like I was being victimized by it happening. It was just, okay, I now find myself in this position. Now what? Because one thing's damn sure, I didn't want to stay there.
That was the question I was asking. You know, all these countless amount of mileage on your foot.
Yeah.
A lot of thinking time. Like, what was the plan? What was the plan?
No, there wasn't really a plan. Do you know what it was? It was almost like a recalibrating. It was almost like I would walk past coffee shops and watch people having coffee and think, well, that's normal.
Wow.
Do you know it? And I'd walk past Peter Pan's, as it was called back then, in Southend, Adventure Island, and watch people going on the rides thinking, no, that's normal. People just out having fun, spending time together, that's normal.
But that's not normal, though. That thought process is not normal. To be able to compartmentalize at that level, because I would like that. That's sort of, like, where does that skill? That's a skill.
Yeah,
like that is a skill, right?
I've learned that's a skill now.
It is absolutely.
Yeah, and it's a powerful skill, and it's actually a skill set that stands you in really good stead. Because if you can compartmentalize something that's happened that you didn't like the outcome of, it doesn't stop you from going and doing the next thing. Because you're able to say, okay, I'll learn from that.
Yeah.
That was bad. That didn't go the way that I wanted it to go. That was a mistake. That was an error. I've learned. Now what?
Brilliant.
You know?
Amazing.
And that's, where's that come from? I honestly couldn't tell you. The only thing that I could suggest is that it was a product of being in a situation where every day you're confronted with so many different scenarios in such a busy, hectic, crazy household with a lot of dysfunction, that you had to do something to keep your brain straight, to not lose the plot, and to be able to have a bit of fun and enjoy yourself. To do that, you had to be able to move on from something that you was currently experiencing to where you wanted to go. And that's a skill set that I guess the only thing I can say in answer to that is that maybe I developed from a young age.
Yeah, that is powerful. You know, being able to just compartmentalize and being in that position and looking at someone else having coffee and not going, I wish I could have a coffee. But you're going, that's normal. And I'm going to get there.
Right.
That's super, super powerful, right?
Yeah. And that was the thought process. And I would do things like go into shops, you know, clothes shops, and look at people buying things and just think, well, they've only bought that because they like it. And that sounds like, well, of course they bought it because they like it. But no, when you've got nothing and now you're on the street, watching someone purchase something just because they like it and not because they need it to survive is different. You don't need that jumper to survive. You don't need that blazer to survive, those shoes to survive. You don't need that to survive. So when you don't have anything and you are homeless, the things you look at are the things that you need. I need to go shopping. I know that I need some more milk because it's not going to last because there's no fridge. Or I need to buy something new every day because I haven't got anything to cook. I haven't got a cooker. I haven't got a fridge or anything anywhere I can store these items. So they have to be things that you can consume quickly. So it's like every day surviving. So then to go and watch people doing things that they just wanted to do just because they did, I was almost like absorbing their freedom. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Watching them and thinking,
powerful.
wow, that can happen. That is a thing. You can. And what used to blow my mind as well is someone might have like a half-finished drink and then be like, I'm done with that. I'll go and get something else. And I'll be like, wow, like you've got that much money. In essence, it's not. It's an extra £2 maybe. But it felt so big. So the time that I used to spend around walking was to and from, at first, the hostel for that short period of time. Then it was, you know, roughing it more and walking around. Then you've got endless time to do what you want. You know, no one's keeping track of you, where you are, what you're doing. And walking through, you know, places that were busy so that you could get noise and interaction, like Adventure Island or places like that, or the seafront that's always got things going on or people going on, or the Kurzel in Southend where there's a bowling alley, and, you know, I love bowling. So it was walking through there just to keep recalibrated with a bit of normality and not to lose myself too much in this thing that was going on that I wanted to get out of.
Wow. Such a powerful mindset. I mean, if people just took that away and just been able to say, compartmentalize, put yourself in places that allows you to think of what's possible, not so much in that deep, dark place that you might be in, and that in itself can really, really change everything, can't it? So that's super powerful.
Massively. Like, environment is really powerful because if you're going to sit under a boat and all you're going to do is feel sharp, cold shells underneath you, and you've got this boat that if you're laying down is like a coffin over you, it's like this, it's here, it's close, you're not going to think normal. You're not going to think straight. And you go, well, obviously you're not. But then what? If that is where you are, then what? Then you have to physically take yourself to a situation where you do want to be. You do want to feel it. You absorb that and you look around and you take pleasure in other people's pleasure, if that's what it is to start with. It's a starting point. Keeping your eyes open to the fact that actually there can be good things that can happen, and there are still normal things, normal transactions, people buying coffee, food, clothes, going to the cinema, jumping on a ride. Like, there is a lot of normal stuff that's still going on. Even if I'm not experiencing it right now myself, I'm looking at other people experiencing it thinking, but it's still there. It's not all gone.
How was that transition? Like, was that bridge, you're in the boat, as you call it. And like, how do you, first of all, how long did that go on for? And then how do you transition out of that?
So I realized that this isn't a long-term goal, a long-term plan.
It's not sustainable.
It's not really sustainable. It's very uncomfortable. It's dangerous. So but it was somewhere that I'd naturally gravitate back to if I felt like I needed to. Make sense?
It does.
So it was somewhere that I felt like this is me. This is my
unsafe,
space.
but it's your safe space.
Exactly. And realistically, actually, when you look back, it wasn't actually a bad idea, because how many overturned boats are there in Southend? A lot. No one's going to go and check under every single one to see if there's some random person under there. You were shielded from the elements. You know, it was dark, you know, if you're trying to sleep, whatever. So actually, it wasn't a bad idea. You know, there's worse places, more public spaces that you could be.
Yeah.
And it was a place that you could park your stuff, at least. So that went on and off, but it wasn't a long-term
strategy.
Yeah. So then I went and spoke with the guy who housed my mum and family in the hostel, and said to him, hey, listen, you know, I need somewhere to stay. And the only reason I did that was because he showed initial kindness to my family, and I felt like actually he seems nice. You know, he seems like someone that I can go and speak to. So I went and literally knocked on the hostel door and said, listen, can I come and stay here? And he was like, yeah, but we need to put it through the council, like you're homeless. You know, can you afford to stay here? I said, well, no, at the moment I can't. He said, well, listen, we need to speak to the council. So he helped and set those calls up and make those calls. And, you know, it was £2 a night, this hostel. That's what it came down to. It's £2 for this room. And we sorted it out quickly, same day, if not the day after, when we were focused on doing this thing. And I said, like, have you got availability? And he said, yeah, we've got a room upstairs. I was just like, ugh, like that feeling of there's a room, there's a space. Was my first step towards like independence, because this now was truly the first time that I'd ever moved out of home. You know.
And how old are you at this point?
Still 15.
Still 15.
Still 15. Yep, so still 15, and I was in there from 15 until I was 16 going on 17 in this room. So I stayed there for some time, and I got in this room, and it was small, but it was comfortable, you know, and it was my room. Now I had, you know, a home. And I felt really content. I felt really content in there.
Wow.
Yes, there was still funny things going on in there. Yeah, I still saw people scurrying around with DVD players and TVs and all sorts. I had people banging on my door, you know, because obviously if you're in there, it may well be that you're in there because you want to do, you know, drugs or
Those sort of things, yeah.
Those sorts of things, which, you know, are an escape mechanism for a lot of individuals that are in there. And that's how they've learned to cope with things. I'd never turned to drugs, you know, to this day, never touched a drug, never touched a cigarette, just not been my thing. I know what my personality's like. If I want to get hooked on something, I'll probably do it quite fast.
Gonna go hard.
Yeah, I'm gonna go hard. Yeah, so I can't allow myself to try that and put myself in the way of temptation like that. So didn't do that, but had people banging on the door and, you know, late at nights, whatever, kicking at it and like, have you got money? Can I have some money? Have some money? You got that in there? You got this in there? You know. So I was like, okay, it's just part and parcel of what it was and where I was. But from there, now I was able to go and get a job, to go and work.
What was your first job?
So after the first things like the paper rounds and those things, my first job was at the Kurzel, which is a bowling alley.
Okay.
And the reason that I was there in the bowling alley is because I did a lot of bowling. I did a lot of temping bowling, played at county and a national level. So did a lot of temping bowling and was good at it. And it just made sense for me that I'd work there because I spend so much time there anyway. So I naturally spend time there. So I may as well get paid for spending time there. And I could bowl for free now. Well, bowling can be quite expensive, especially if you don't have a lot of money. So was able to go there, work as a lane rep, you know, hosting parties and all that good stuff, and, you know, making sure that everything was ready for the kids' parties, and then bowl afterwards. And that was a great connector for me. You know, that was a great connection that I was able to build with a lot of different people, a lot of adults, because there were leagues that happen in the evenings, you know, Monday night league, Tuesday night league, and you'd get 80 adults that would appear, and they're all living relatively normal lives and doing normal things, and I could have these conversations with them, you know. So I was used to having adult conversation from a super early age, and that was the first role that I was in, if you like, that, yeah, I felt connected. That really reconnected me.
Wow. And then how about just like at this point, what's happening with your siblings?
I don't really know because I disconnected from my family on quite a large level. I couldn't tell you their journey. I don't know what it looked like.
Okay.
I know that they were in that hostel for quite some time. I know that they got rehoused on a couple of occasions in different places.
Yeah.
And eventually I did, after being in that hostel for a short amount of time, I did actually go and stay with my mum again in one of these places that she was housed in. Not nice, not nice places, lots of fleas and lots of things jumping around on you and biting you and all that stuff. But it was, back on the mattress on the floor again, sort of situation there, because it was a small place.
When you went with them, was there ever, things that, were you ever kind of thinking and wondering, like, what their experiences was like?
No.
No.
And I don't know. And I've never really asked.
Why's that?
I feel like one of the ways that I can keep my mind in the performance that it stays in often is by not verbalizing it too much with too many people, and by not having too much input on it, because I could start seeing things from their situation. If they were like, "Oh, Ben, do you remember when this? And do you remember that? And do you remember this? And do you remember that?" And I'd be like, "God, yeah. Oh my God, yeah. Oh, I do. I remember that. Oh, I didn't realize you experienced that." And I start feeling, and I don't. That's your journey. It's not my journey. My journey was my journey, and I actually chose to do that. That kind of breakaway and go. That was my choice. And it was for all those reasons, because it puts you in a dark place. Of course it does. You cannot be experiencing those life situations feeling positive and happy and upbeat about it. You can't. And then you can't then all come together and be grumbling about the fact that it's not great and expect things to change, because they're not going to.
Was that an energy that drove you away in the first place, or was that just it was just a decision you made at the time, but you've just kind of decided to keep those two things separate now?
Yeah.
The
thing that drove me away in the first place ultimately was lack of space, because it drove me mad. You see the size of this room and how many people are expected to live there to drive you mad. So the lack of space, it was so tight. I mean, you think about how small this room was and how much space a bed actually takes up. So then in terms of a walkway that you've got, a gangway, it's a strip. Where are you all going to stand when you're out of bed? You've got this tiny little strip of carpet, and now you'll stand there next to each other. Like, it was that small. There's nowhere to go. And that's what drove me mad. So that was the first thing. And the second thought I had in my head was, listen, if the total sum of the efforts that have been made in life so far to accommodate me has ended in me being homeless, I'll give it a damn good go at trying to not make myself homeless, and I'll take this into my own hands then. And that's that feeling of control that kicked back in again, was I'll take this from here. Let me give this a go, because it can't get any worse.
Wow.
The worst situation would be that I'd now probably get addicted to something and get into all sorts of trouble. And I knew I wasn't going to go down that route, because it's just not me. So then I had to take control and do something else. And that ultimately was the decision that I made.
That's powerful, right? If you're gonna do something, then what was that saying? Is if you want something different, then you've actually got to be the one to do something different, because the world is not really just gonna come and say, "Oh, you want something different? Here it is, mate. There you go." Right?
That's it. You have to put yourself in the way of that. You have to intentionally say, "Right, I'm going to put myself in a different situation. I'm going to try something different, experience something different, push something different." Because if you want a different result, then doing the same thing and hoping for a different result doesn't often happen.
Yeah. Wow. And I think it's really, really powerful to kind of discuss, really kind of where you've come from, because, the introduction I've spoken about, you've done, 15,000 transactions, turnover 10 million, 4 billion pounds in actual real estate sold. But it's really understanding, okay, cool, here's where this person's come from. But now let's talk about that transition, right?
Yeah.
Because it is incredible. I'd imagine that journey is, full of twists and turns and everything else.
Sure.
How do we get to where we are today?
Okay, yeah, good question. Step by step by little step, because what what you don't have in that situation is just, oh, bang, all of a sudden I'm a master at business and I can do my sales, my marketing, my advertising, my message, this. Like, it's not all of a sudden you've got this knowledge. You have to work at that. But something that I was obsessed with ever since I was a young kid was property, was why is it that so many people that are on these rich lists are involved in property? Why is that? And that seemed to be a common thread that kept coming up. And I heard when I was very, very young, there was this story on the news about this man that, you know, in the late 80s that broke the Bank of England and made like $1 billion in one day, you know, and I was like, say what? Like how
much?
How much? You can't even comprehend that amount of money as a kid. You know, and where we lived, there was this one road that you drive down and it was filled with immensely aspirational properties that you'd go by, and every one was detached in its own land with its own gated entrance, beautiful, stunning properties with garages and outbuildings and hanging pots and gardeners, and just one after the other. And, you know, coming back from school, I could choose to cycle down that road rather than the one that took me straight to mine. And I did often, looking at them, just thinking, how do you get in a place like that? How is that possible? What are you doing? Then I'd go and research it and find out and ask questions and just start learning, you know. So I always had that obsession with observing and then learning.
So you'd ask someone the question, have you done this? And when they gave you the answer, as opposed to just being like, oh, that's pretty cool, you actually go away and say, okay, this is the answer they've given me. So now I know what to look into, and you start researching it.
Yeah, start researching it. You know, there's so many tools out there on the internet now, which, you know, there wasn't as many then. You're going back 20 years. The internet wasn't of a mature place as it is now. You know, you don't have things as beautifully organized on YouTube as they are now. You can go away and learn what you want.
On your mobile phone.
On your mobile phone, yeah. You know, you had like Nokias back then that barely you could get Snake, you know, on the phone, and like the keypad, and, you know, got this thing trailing around. That was the extent of what we were working with. You know, you didn't get like smart screens and you could learn what you wanted when you wanted. So there's a lot of opportunity now. However, I would say now that the problem sometimes with too much information is that you can do nothing.
Absolutely.
Because it paralyzes you into there's infinite amount of possibilities. It's like if I said to you, right, Ibrahim, we're going to start playing a game right now. Go.
Shit, which one?
What are we doing?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Which one? What game?
What are we playing?
Yeah.
Whatever. Anything. Go. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it's infinite. It's the possibilities are endless. And when there's endless information, endless possibilities, often that stuns you into nothing. And you say, actually, I don't know what I could do. Maybe there should be some sort of guide that I could follow. Tell me the rules of this thing that you're telling me to do, and I'll do it. So that I wasn't stunned into that infinite paralysis like you can be now, which I think is really important to choose your path, choose it well, and stick to what that path looks like so that you're not stunned into paralysis again and again. So that's kind of what I did. I realized that property was that course that I wanted to follow.
Okay, brilliant. I mean, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was going to say, that's something that a lot of people do struggle with at this moment in time. It's something that I actually struggled with myself as well. So I'm really keen to understand, like, how, in this day and age, obviously I know you luckily didn't have those distractions, but what would you say to someone in this day and age as to how to have that narrow focus and say, okay, this is it, and then I'm just going to be monomaniacal on this task? How do you do that?
Good. Focus. So the first thing that I'd say is the answer likely isn't an answer that's out there somewhere looking for what it is that I should be doing, trying to get inspiration from what it is that I should be doing. Generally, if you look in, then you will find what it is that you should be doing, what you enjoy, what your core passion is. And often it's not the thing that you tell everyone that it is. It's the thing that when you start talking about, you light up, you get excited, you can't help but become animated, you love it. Even if you don't know how that's going to make you money, you know that you love this thing. That generally, that thing that lights you up, that brings you to life is your thing. So it's having that understanding of what it is that makes you light up and passionate and what you love and what you really want to do. Get that thing written down, understand what action you want to take. So there's different individuals, right? Some of you might want a lifestyle business. You want a business where there's a certain amount of money coming in every month. It's comfortable. You can drive around in a good car. You can go and eat in nice restaurants. You can buy nice clothes, have those holidays. You don't want to build an empire. You don't want the stress of building loads of teams and businesses and branches and shops and all that stuff, but you're happy with lifestyle. So then you have to flesh out, what's my path? How much do I want? And how much product do I have to sell to get there? And then you can start paring it back and you can get that focus. Well, I want lifestyle. What does lifestyle mean to me? It means X amount of money. And what is it that we're going to sell? This. Well, how much does that cost? This. Okay, so now we know that it's going to be this amount of sales that we need to do. Now the question is, how do we get that amount of sales? How many people am I speaking with? So there's business strategy that comes into that. Makes sense? And that's how you can get focused. Start writing it down, start understanding, start honing in. But then it may be that you are an empire builder and you do want the bigger type business, that style business, which I know that I love. I just love that idea of being in control of a bigger beast. It's not right, it's not wrong. It's just my own propensity towards what it is that I want. And different people want different things, and that keeps the world running.
Absolutely. So when you figured out it was real estate and it was going to be property, like, did you just decide, okay, if I'm going to do this, then I've just got to do this really, really big? Like, what, how did that sort of transition to where we are now?
Starts one step at a time. It starts one step at a time. So it starts with, okay, property. Let's say that's the vehicle that I'm going to use in business. Yep, it's just a vehicle that you use in business. And so I was, okay, I'll use property as a vehicle. Obviously, from my background of not having any, I become obsessive about wanting it. So now it was, okay, property's been taken away. I feel like I want to be in control in the sense of property. So that's what I'm going to control. So it was, okay, what do I want? Well, I need to do a transaction. That's where the money is. That's what I need to do. So you have to go and find out, how is it that you're going to take the first step? Property is complex. It can be complicated. There's lots of laws. There's lots that surrounds it. So you have to get educated. So I went and did as many free open evenings as I could with companies back then that were doing free open evenings and previews and presentations and all that stuff. And just sat there again and again, going to them, absorbing what it is that I could absorb. And there was a lady there who run one of the events who, I guess, if you like, I don't want to say had pity, but understood that I was at the start of my journey and this was going to be a bit of a tricky journey, and gave me more advice than maybe she otherwise should have done for the fact I hadn't bought a course or a product or a service from them, but she just sort of helped. And I sort of worked with her on getting my first kind of deal over the line, if you like. And without going into the ins and the outs of it, it's one step after the other. And it's having those encounters, it's having conversations, it's opening up, it's allowing others to have positive input on your life. It's, again, putting yourselves in situations where those conversations can happen. Would that conversation have happened had I still been under my boat in Southend-on-Sea? Obviously not. You have to take what is the next natural step and then the next one. And that next natural step cannot be so big that it overwhelms you, because then you procrastinate. And that's what I was saying at the start with, success to me looks like I'm in control, because if I feel like I'm out of control, I don't do anything, because I feel like it's too stressful. I feel stressed and it takes me back to times I was out of control. Generally speaking, if I feel like I'm procrastinating or out of control, the vision I'm going for, the next step I'm going for at that point in time is just too big. That's all. It's not that the vision's wrong. I haven't chunked it down enough to take the next little step, the little win that compounds, bang, into a big step.
Wow.
So if I feel like I'm procrastinating, stressed or out of control, I chunk down to the point where I could do that right now. I could go and do it.
What do you mean by chunk down? What does chunking down mean?
So something like this. I want to go and do my first property deal at a young, tender age in my teens. Well, how do I do that? Because you can't just say, oh, I did it. Well, how did you do it? Did you understand? Like, how? What does that look like? Well, first things first, I need to understand how to do it before I do it. So I have to educate myself. But I don't have any money to do that. So what do? Well, next thing I need to go and research is how to find places where I can do that with for free. Then I go and do it for free. When I go and do it for free and I learn for free, then I start a natural conversation with somebody that's there that takes me further and further into my journey. So it's chunking it down. It's taking a big idea and then doing what's the practical step-by-steps that you can take. And as long as you're taking small incremental steps towards a set goal that you've got, and it doesn't overwhelm you, you're going in a good direction, and you should celebrate them.
Wow, powerful. And I think that's it's such a great point, because there is a strategy, and there are step-by-steps to actually achieving any result.
100%.
You know, and sometimes when we're looking at TikTok and Instagram and all this sort of thing, I keep talking about here, you know, even I do Instagram content myself as well, but you know, it's not just that 1 minute clip. That's the solution. It's like there's always layers and layers of information and steps that you have to actually take.
Absolutely.
You know, that's obviously gotten you to where you are today.
Yeah.
You know, and look, like I said in the introduction, all right? So this would be my final question, all right? You know, you have gone on, you know, from where you started, you know, without any freebies, any gimmies at all. You've been able to go out there and really achieve many things. You know, you've now done, you know, millions of pounds in turnover, billions of pounds in terms of actual real estate transaction. You've been involved in, like, just thinking about that 15,000. Like, what? Like, one, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, like, today,
Yeah.
what is your need to succeed?
Oh, nice question. My need for succeed is looking back with almost fond memory at everything that happened during that time, during homelessness and the lead up to that, and wanting to create a pathway to help others to do similar. And I'm not saying I want a legion of property investors. No, I'm saying in whatever field it is that you want to go and grow yourself in, regardless where you find yourself, right at the bottom, under the boat, on the ground, wherever you are, my need for succeed is, listen, I know that if I can, you can. I'm aware of that. And if I can, then you can. Then my need to succeed is to help those to succeed as well, to not only then take control of what it is that I do, but to help them to take control of their scenarios. And any time that I feel like I'm maybe being a bit slow, a bit procrastinating, not quite wanting to push myself today, I'll either take a walk and take myself past some homeless people and look at them and go, hey, listen, they're there, you can help them, but you have to show them the path to help them from, and that's an immense driver. Or two, just take myself back and think, listen, how many people are sat there in those situations and scenarios that just with a little bit of information that you could give them would bang, just explode their life as well. So my need for succeed, is I need to succeed in able to give back in that way. That ultimately the reason I got into property and to control my own business journey was because of the situation I find myself in. And I now know without any doubt whatsoever, my strong belief is that if I can, you can. And so my need is to show you how you can.
Wow. That is so powerful. It's such a noble need. I'll definitely be joining in whatever capacity I can to actually make that happen.
It will be an honor.
So just let me know. Definitely. So thrilled. And look, I'll be honest with you, there is so much more that I wanted to go through. Like if we can do this again, that would be absolutely phenomenal.
We'll do a follow-up. I'm very much up for that. I'd love to.
Brilliant stuff. Ben Jacob Smith, thank you very much for being on the
Thank you so much. It's my honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.